Hi there. Today I'm going to demonstrate how to paint a pine tree on this little 4x4 inch block. I'm just going to put it in the middle for the most part. You can't really see my entire palette, but I'm really only going to be using a couple of colors. This is Payne's Gray on my palette right now. I've already started this just for purposes of demonstration. And normally I paint these trees with a fan brush. I basically use the corner of the fan brush like a pencil. So I've loaded my brush up, I've added lots of clear wax to my color, and I don't start at the very tip of the pine tree. I start in kind of the middle or down about a third, and that's because normally when I put my brush down onto the surface of the painting, it tends to blob, and I don't want to have blobs up at the very top of the pine tree. I really just continue on in this vein, sort of sketching in the tree. I don't paint the whole trunk of the tree from top to bottom because it seems like it tends to always be visible. Like the more wax I add, the tree trunk just sort of stays there in the middle. But I kind of sketch in a very light shape of a tree. I try not to make it too full. I leave some sky holes, as my friend Gail sometimes calls them, although this is a small tree, so there's really not much to see through it. But here I've just taken a needle tool and I'm going to rough up the surface, sort of try to make the edge more jagged so that it's more organic looking. And that way I can, get this tree into a shape that I prefer. So this background actually does have a layer of clear wax over it, so if I do have to remove anything, it's not going to take the color off behind the tree. That was always a problem in the past. Sometimes when I would try to remove something from the background, it would end up lifting the color and I'd have to paint it back in. So oftentimes now I'll paint my background, put a layer of clear wax over top, so if I do have to sort of edit on the edges of my tree, I'm not pulling the color out of the sky, basically. So I gave it a light fuse and I'm going back and just trying to build up this tree more in the center than on the edges and get it into a size and shape that I like. So I will just kind of dab, and I'm only going to use one color. I'll sort of hit it with some highlight at the end, but really I just want to use a dark color for this part of the process until I get the tree basically how I like it. And yeah, it's just trying to build it up. So I'm going to speed this up a little bit. I'll continue this process of going in with the needle tool. Here I'm just putting another painting down to rest my hand on, so it's easier because these blocks are about an inch and a bit thick. They're actually made out of 2x6s, and so it's hard to hold my arm up that long. So I'm going to speed this up for a bit and I'll check back in shortly. So here my tree is getting pretty close to the size and shape that I want it to be. You need to fuse every now and then, but just a light kiss of heat, as Alicia Tormey will say. You don't want to flatten everything that you've been working to build up. So I do like to go kind of all four directions because sometimes the texture can hide little crumbly bits in the recesses. So I just give it a very, very light fuse so I don't melt down everything I've just, basically added to build up this texture. So, I mean, it's kind of a little bit of a tedious process to get it as deep as I want, and this is just a very small tree, but I just keep adding wax and I keep using the tools to try to get it to be what I like to see in a tree. Not too perfect, but some variation here and there. And I usually will take the needle tool and try to use it at more of an angle to almost like scoop the branches a little bit. So I'm going to speed up for the next bit. I'll check back. So at this point, I'm just using the corner of the fan brush again to build up a little bit of the texture on the roots, but it's a fine line to not put too much wax on your brush to do this, and it kind of has to be the right temperature. I keep my palette at 150 degrees, and I find that that's warm enough so that I can manipulate the wax the way that I like to. But you may have to, adjust a little bit more or less depending on what might work for you. So, and I'm careful to keep my brushes flat when they cool so that they have a nice crisp edge, and I use the corner. So here I'm just using the curved part of this needle tool to clean up like the roots and just shape them a little bit how I like. And yeah, it's a lot of back and forth, adding and taking away, and I basically just continue along until I'm happy with the texture of these things. And it's really just a lot of patience and adding, taking away until I'm happy with it. And this one actually worked out pretty good. I think overall it took me about 35 minutes to paint the tree. And I mean, it's a small painting, so there's not really a lot to it. And yeah, I did spend some time on the roots, but sometimes they work a little easier than others for whatever reason. I tend to paint them mostly the same way. Another technique I use is I'll put an image transfer of a tree down, and especially if it's a little bit bigger tree, and then I can sort of paint more to the outer edges without filling in the middle. And I do that on occasion as well, because sometimes those really fine branches are difficult to paint on a small scale. So I will incorporate my photography and basically paint over it. Okay, I'm gonna speed up again. light fuses along the way, just so you don't build up a lot of texture that's not fused, and keep going like that. So I'm pretty happy with this tree as it is. So I'm now going to try to go with a bit of lighter color just to catch the texture and give it a bit of depth. So this brush is pretty warm and it just kind of blobbed on there with my first touch, which I try to avoid, but I'm kind of wiped it off on the bottom of the edge of the painting there, and I'm just going to try to add some lighter blue that I basically mixed with the white to this tree here. And I'll just, it's almost like a dry brush technique. You don't want it to be too warm. And I'm just going to break up these lumps of white basically that I've added on top. And so yeah, once again, back and forth. I'll add a little bit of this top color and take some away and just play around. Okay, so I'm reasonably happy with that. Just going to add my signature down in the corner here. And I think I'm going to put a little spatter on there, which never really seems to go where I want it. Takes me a few tries to even get it to spatter. I'm always afraid of putting too much on the brush, so I've kind of learned to go slow in adding this. Otherwise, I'll end up with a big blob. Okay, for this little 4x4, I think I'm pretty much done. I'm going to give it a bit of a fuse and take the tape off the sides, and that will basically be it. So I hope this has been a good demo for you and just illustrates how I go about painting these small trees. And on a larger scale, it's really the same process. It's just the detail shows up, more, I guess, on when you scale up the tree. So, but for a small one, this works pretty good. And yeah, for bigger trees, you need to use bigger brushes. Oftentimes, I'll try to use small brushes, and then I'm shaking my head, going, "What am I doing? Use a bigger brush." So, all right. I will speed this up to the end, and thanks for watching.